Hi everyone, my name is Jen and this is Beast House Plants. We're talking about things houseplant and home design. Welcome back. So today I'm going to be making a video that I really wish I had when I was first starting out, and that is a Pothos identification guide. To this day, Pothos are definitely still my favorite plants because they are so versatile. They're so easy to take care of and they thrive in a lot of different environments, so they're definitely one of my favorite. There are a lot of different varieties of Pothos, so I'm going to tell you how to tell them all apart. Just a disclaimer before we begin that all of the names in this video are going to be relative to where I live. I live in California in the United States. Different countries actually have different common names for a lot of these plants. For example, Australia calls a plant that we call Enjoy Snow Queen. So, just keep that in mind. Okay, so the very first question is probably, what is a pothos and do I have one? When we're referring to pothos, we're commonly referring to a plant like this. You've definitely seen it before. It's found in pretty much any major hardware store and or grocery store, etc. And the correct botanical name for this plant is not pothos at all. It's actually Epipremnum Aureum, but it is commonly referred to as a pothos, even though it's not in the genus Pothos at all. So this is the plant we're going to be referring to for the rest of the video as pothos. Okay, so the plant that this plant commonly gets mistaken for is something like this. So this is a philodendron. This is a Philodendron hericium, or a heart-leafed philodendron. It looks like that. This is just the green variety, but there are variegated versions of this plant as that they are variegated versions of pothos. And how you tell them apart is probably easiest by the leaf texture. So if you look at the philodendron, the leaf is definitely much flatter and thinner and doesn't quite have as much texture versus, let's look at this green pothos. So same color, no variegation. If you look at the leaves, it's definitely more shaped and there's a lot more texture. This one almost kind of looks corrugated, but not really, but there's definitely more texture. The way that they grow and their growth pattern is also different. So this is a pothos. So as you can see, this is the main stem, right? And then this is the petiole of a leaf. And it just branches off directly from the main stem like that. And then if you look at the end, it'll just send out a new leaf and then it'll send out more stem. Versus if you look at the philodendron, let me grab that again, the way it grows, it actually puts out the stem first and then there's like a sheath. Do you see this brown bit? That's a sheath that covers the leaf as it forms, and then the leaf will emerge from that sheath and the sheath will start die off. So this is a newer leaf, so this sheath hasn't died off yet. And then eventually it get brown like that. Focus. And then you just rip off that sheath. Normally I rip it off because if you don't rip it off and you leave it, sometimes pests can harbor in there. So yeah, so that's the difference between a philodendron and a pothos. Another plant that commonly gets mistaken for a pothos is something like this. This is also a relatively common plant. So this is what is commonly referred to as a silver pothos, but it is not a pothos and it is also not an Epipremnum Aureum. This is actually a Scindapsus, which is a different family of plants. It has really pretty silvery markings. This specific variety is the Scindapsus pictus silvery, and yeah, I don't know, people commonly call it a pothos because I think the care tips for it are very similar to a pothos. It's also pretty similar in terms of its like lighting requirements, watering requirements, etc. But yeah, not a pothos, not an epipremnum, not a philodendron. It's a Scindapsus. Okay, so now that we have definitely decided that you have a pothos and not a philodendron, not a Scindapsus, let's go over all the different varieties of pothos. So the most common variety of pothos is a golden pothos. You'll see these everywhere. If you live in a very, very tropical place like Florida, these pretty much are considered like an invasive species because they grow so well and they grow outside and get like huge leaves. A golden pothos is what is behind me here. A golden pothos, these grow really well. I find that these are the easiest in terms of care needs. So you can put these in like quite a dark corner and they will still grow perfectly fine. However, if you want a lot of variegation, definitely make sure that all of its needs are met in terms of lighting. So it's in a very bright indirect light. When I had this in my east facing window, it was putting out leaves that were beautiful. Although the variegation in a plant like the golden pothos is stable, meaning that it can't revert like a monstera albo, if it's not receiving adequate lighting, the plant will put out less variegated leaves in order to maximize its energy, because only the green part of a plant photosynthesizes, and obviously it's not advantageous for the plant to put out very highly variegated leaves if it's not getting enough light. So although it's stable, like the variegation, you still definitely want to make sure that you're giving it a lot of bright indirect light if you want the maximum amount of variegation. So all pothos, but especially golden pothos, if you put this plant up a moss pole or a jute pole or something like that, the leaves will become huge. I also temporarily had this plant training up one of my walls, and I definitely saw a size increase in the leaves. That's because these are epiphytes, meaning they like to grow up trees and bark, and so when they are attached to something, they feel more secure that way, and that allows them to grow bigger leaves. I have decided that I would really like this to just trail, so I took it off my wall. But if you want like really big leaves, definitely put it up a pole. Okay, so I think the next most common variety of pothos is a marble queen pothos. This is a marble queen pothos, very similar to a golden pothos, except for instead of yellow variegation, the variegation is white or cream. And marble queen pothos kind of encapsulates all of the different varieties within this variegation. So some leaves look like this, where the variegation is more subtle. Some leaves look like this, where it's definitely a lot more white. There's also leaves like this, which is called like a half moon, where half the leaf is green and half the leaf is variegated. Some like smattering right there. So as long as the variegation is white or cream and green, and it's speckled like this, it's a marble queen pothos. These are very similar in terms of care needs for the golden pothos. So everything I said about the golden pothos applies here. Okay, so this is where it starts to get like a little bit more complicated, because you're looking at this plant and then a lot of people get it confused with a plant like this. So it's very similar, right? Because it's basically the same plant as far as my knowledge goes. This in the United States is called a snow queen pothos. It's called other things in other places, but basically a snow queen pothos is just a very white marble queen. These leaves have been specifically selected and specifically grown to be very white like this. Although variegation in plants is mostly luck in nature, like it just kind of happens as a mutation, you know, over time we can definitely select like specific stems that produce better variegation, and if we give it the proper conditions, then they produce like this, where it's like definitely all uniformly more white than green, versus this, which is my Marble Queen, which is kind of like everything, right? And the reason that we can tell is because my Snow Queen, I put it in a little bit of a darker corner recently, and it definitely hasn't liked that. These newer leaves definitely look way more green. Way more green than the leaves over here, which are the older leaves. So because I put it in a darker corner, now it's, you know, trying to get more light, so now it's starting to revert a little bit or turn more green in order to photosynthesize better. So that means I need to definitely move this plant to a brighter area. Okay, so next plant, the next plant that I see a lot is this. This is a neon pothos. There is a variety of philodendron that is this color, and that is called a philodendron lemon lime. It's a different plant. It's a philodendron versus this is an Epipremnum Aureum. Look at the colors. I used to like not love neon plants, but lately, let me tell you, lately I've been loving this plant. So this specific plant actually ended up being a little bit variegated. So if you look, there's different tones, like that one leaf is darker than the other one, and this one has like a little bit of variegation. So I think it's really cool. So yeah, neon pothos. I would say that the neon pothos you would want to give a little bit more light to than the Marble Queen or the Golden Pothos, just because the coloring of the leaf is so much lighter. It definitely doesn't photosynthesize as well, so you want to put it in a little bit of a brighter place. Okay, talking about pothos without variegation, this is the all green version of the pothos. It's called the Jade Pothos, and I find that this one is actually kind of hard to find, like the ones without variegation, which I think is so interesting. This one did end up getting like a little bit of a variegation, kind of looks white. So very similar to how the Marble Queen Pothos and the Snow Queen Pothos, I think it goes the other way as well, where this plant has been selected to be producing all green leaves, and so it's a different variety of pothos, even though like technically they're all really like the same plant. But yeah, so the Jade Pothos definitely is very flexible in terms of lighting needs because it's all green. I actually like this one like quite a bit, even though it's boring compared to like all the fun crazy variegations you can get in pothos. I don't know, I just like really like this one. This one I've noticed definitely grows the fastest out of all of my different types of pothos. Obviously that makes sense because it's all green, so it photosynthesizes better. So yeah, so if you want like an extra fast growing pothos, try to get a green one. In terms of watering requirements, I water all of my pothos the same in that I let them dry out 100%. Love these clear nursery pots. I talk about them in like every single video, so I'm sure you're sick of me talking about them, but they're great. So literally all the way dry before I water them. This one needs a little bit of water right now, but sometimes if you let them go a little bit too long, you can definitely tell because all of the leaves get like super droopy. This is a good point in between, like the soil has been all the way dried, but the plant isn't like on the verge of dying yet. Okay, we're like running through these pretty rapidly. The next variety of pothos that I want to share with you, this used to be one of my favorite varieties of pothos. This is the Enjoy Pothos. Look at that. So the variegation is definitely very sectorial. It's not speckled like the Marble Queen Pothos. It's definitely in like chunks. So like a chunk of green, a chunk of green, a chunk of white, a chunk of mint, etc. So yeah, the Enjoy Pothos is a little bit of a smaller leafed variety of pothos. Although if you do train them up like a potem, they do get bigger, similar to how the golden pothos, the leaves will get bigger, but just like this, where like you're gonna let it trail, it's naturally quite a bit smaller. So let's do a little bit of a comparison. So this is my Enjoy, and this is the Snow Queen. So can you tell? Okay, so if we look at these two leaves, this is a leaf, like a normal sized leaf, and this is a normal sized leaf. So if you put them next to each other, this one is definitely bigger. I don't know if you can even tell with that comparison, but just trust me, this is a smaller variety of pothos. The leaf texture is also different. If we look closely, it's like bumpy. It's like kind of like the leaves almost look deformed like that, but it's just like that. It's almost like if there's like ruching on it. It's definitely a little bit more like corrugated. So it's definitely an interesting texture. I really like how like bold this variegation is. I have noticed that the Enjoy Pothos is a much slower grower than the other varieties of pothos that I have shown thus far, but that kind of makes sense once again with the whiter variegation. Okay, so the next plant is where the confusion between the Enjoy usually comes from, and that it's this plant. So this is a Pearls and Jade Pothos. However, sometimes you'll find this mislabeled in the United States, and I'm pretty sure it's because the Pearls and Jade Pothos name is patented or trademarked or something like that, so only specific growers can't grow it. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure why. There's a lot of mislabeling of this plant in the United States though. But if you look at them side by side, they look very similar. The Pearls and Jade, like the Enjoy, is a smaller leaf variety of pothos, and it has the same leaf texture. So it's a little bit corrugated, a little bit more textured, kind of just like that bumpy feel. But the difference is the variegation. So remember how we talked about the Enjoy Pothos, the variegation is very sectorial with no speckling. So if we look at the Pearls and Jade, it's kind of like the baby between a Marble Queen and an Enjoy, where it is sectorial. There are chunks of green and chunks of white, but the white also has some marbling and some speckling of variegation. So usually if you look at a plant with sectorial variegation, if there's any marbling in the lighter areas at all, it's a Pearl and Jade. If there's no marbling, it's just sectorial variegation, it's an Enjoy. All right, let's look at them side by side again. This is the Enjoy, and this is the Pearls and Jade. There you go. Okay, so the next variety of pothos is quite different from the other varieties I've showed you so far. So this is a Manjula Pothos. If you look at the leaf shape, it is a completely different leaf shape than the plants I've shown you before. So look at this leaf shape, and then let's go back to this Marble Queen. How the Marble Queen is more of like a teardrop shaped versus this one is definitely like just fatter. This variety of pothos has a much bigger leaf than the Marble Queens, the Golden Pothos, etc. So it's like kind of like the opposite of the Enjoy, where that one's smaller. This is the bigger variety. I really love the leaf shape of this. Kind of similar to like the Marble Queen, how pretty much any variety of variegation, like the spectrum of variegation, is still considered a Marble Queen. Pretty much any combination of variegation on a plant with a shape like this is just considered a Manjula. So, you know, some of them are more sectorial. So you look at that one, it's pretty chunky, white, green, and this one is like very marbled. This one is a little bit lighter than all the other ones. It's still considered a Manjula Pothos. So this plant was actually very kindly gifted to me by my friend Vintage Plants. I'll make sure to link her Instagram in the description for you. Check it out. I've never been able to find this plant in California. She found it in Illinois and mailed it to me. She was so kind. And she actually gifted me 2 of these. So I have this one, which is like doing so well. It's so pretty. And I have another one that was doing awful because I made the mistake of planting it in a terracotta pot. The way I water, terracotta just dries out like way too quickly for me. So that plant was always thirsty and always underwatered, and it was definitely not happy. But I recently repotted it into a Wally Grow planter. I did it over on Instagram, so if you don't follow me on Instagram, make sure you do at Bees House Plants. I repotted it into my Wally Grow loop planter, not spawn, paid for it myself, and it's been like loving life ever since. So yeah, love that thing. Love this plant. I also believe that this plant is not an Epipremnum Aureum. It is an Epipremnum, but I don't think it's an Aureum. I'll definitely have to make sure to double check that, and obviously you saw the name of the plant flash up earlier, so you'll know. Okay, so the last pothos that I have to show you is, once again, not an Epipremnum Aureum, but is in fact a gift from my friend Vintage Plants. Once again, this is a Cebu blue pothos. Look at it. It's called a Cebu blue because it kind of has like a bluish tint to it. So if you look at this compared to the Jade Pothos, you see how like there's definitely a color difference, and the Cebu blue is much bluer. There is also a variety of this plant that is green that is often labeled as Cebu blue, even though it's not. It's so the botanical name for this plant is Epipremnum pinnatum. So if you look at the leaf shape, it's definitely, you know, like a different leaf shape. It is very thin. So yeah, so make sure that when you're looking for this plant that it visibly looks blue to you, because there is a version that's just an Epipremnum pinnatum, not Cebu blue, that looks pretty much identical to this except for it's green. So what's really cool about the Cebu blue is, although compared to, you know, the other plants we saw, it's definitely a smaller leafed variety of plants. But if you train this up a pole or a wall, etc., the leaves get huge, and they end up getting fenestrations, which is like holes in the leaf. Actually, like these pothos, like the golden pothos, also create fenestrations or holes in the leaf once they get like really mature. Like if you look at them in Florida, the trees outside, those do have fenestrations, but that's a little bit harder to achieve indoors, versus I've seen a lot of people with Cebu blue that are mature with fenestrations. So although I don't have mine trained up anything, I'm going to make the assumption that this plant reaches its mature like stage and its mature look a little bit quicker. Don't know if that's true. But yeah, so it's really cool. I'll try to insert a picture now of a mature Cebu blue with fenestrations. So in terms of light and water, I don't do anything special for the Cebu blue. I water it like how I water all of my other plants, which is that I let it dry out completely. And this is in my plant room on the shelf. It's actually not getting that much light, and it's definitely still growing, so definitely not too fussy about plants. So Pothos is often recommended as a beginner's houseplant because it's so easy. You don't really need to increase your humidity. You don't really need to increase anything special for it. They're also very easy to propagate. With all of these plants, if you're looking to propagate, you would cut in the internodes. The internodes is the space between the nodes, and like this is like a node right here. Do you see that? So, okay, how do I hold this? Okay, so this right here, that's a node. The internode is the space between a node. That's another node. On a plant like this, it's very easy to tell. It's the bumpy part. And it's also the part where the petiole of a leaf comes out. That's where the node is. You can see this is producing an aerial root. So that's a very easy visual indicator of where to cut. If you want to propagate, you would cut in the internode, like right here, or like right here. And then you would put this either in water or moss or soil, etc. So these are a great beginner's plant, and they're honestly still one of my favorites, even though I own quote unquote rare plants now. Okay, so now that we've discussed all of the different varieties of pothos that I do have, let's talk about some varieties of pothos that I do not have. So the one that I've been kind of looking for is the Jade Pothos. It's kind of like between a golden pothos and a marble queen pothos. So the variegation color is yellow slash green, but it's kind of like a very subtle variegation versus a golden pothos. The variegation is more contrasty, and the way the variegation looks, it's more marbling and more speckling like the marble queen pothos. So the only place I've ever seen this sold is online, and the only seller that I've seen that stocks it pretty regularly is Gabriella Plants, but they're always like gone within like a second, and they're kind of expensive honestly for a pothos. So I don't have one yet, but I definitely do want one. And the other variety of pothos that I want is a newer variety of pothos. It's called the Epipremnum Golden Green. No, sorry. It's called the Epipremnum Global Green. I believe that this variety of pothos came out of Thailand, and I have seen that some people have been importing it from Thailand, but the place where I actually saw this plant is on Costa Farms' Instagram. So if you don't know, Costa Farms is like a very big plant grower in the United States, if not the biggest plant grower in the United States. And they produce plants for hardware stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, etc. And they announced that this is a new variety of pothos that they will be carrying starting 2021. Although I think I've seen like people have already been finding them, so who knows. So Costa Farms doesn't sell in California at the moment, but I heard that they are starting to sell in California through Walmart. So I am very hopeful that there will be these types of global green pothos in California in the near future. So yeah. Okay, there are definitely a lot of varieties of pothos that I haven't gone over that are more like sport of a different type of pothos, or just are like a little bit more uncommon. One kind of pothos that I do not want is the Shangri-La pothos. It's I guess kind of considered a rarer plant. It's also called like the sleepy pothos, I believe. It looks like wilted spinach to me, honestly, so I don't want it, especially since I will likely have to import it if I do want it. So I just don't really want it. I don't like the way it looks. So yeah, so those are definitely all of the different kinds of pothos I want to share with you. Let me know if you have any further questions in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!